Hello, this is Steve Webster. I just wanted to encourage people today in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic with some numbers and with some other tips that I've been reading to help you to have hopefully less anxiety and more hope and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, sort of thing. So let's spend just a few minutes on this. My first video was 30 minutes, so I'm going to attempt to make this much shorter so it's viewable more likely. So, a couple things. As far as general tips, you should have a routine during your day. Go ahead, get up like you're going to prepare for a normal work life. Get your shower, shave, and whatever the case may be. Uh, be very productive. Start your day with the momentum of productivity by simply making your bed, which I've seen in some other videos or suggestions. So that's a great way to start modeling. Leverage your calendar. So go ahead and schedule in time to exercise, like going for a walk, um, getting enough sunlight, right? Maybe going outside will help to get more sunlight because a lot of times, if you have anxiety, stress, or sadness towards depression, light, being outdoors will help. Exercise will help. So, again, leverage your calendar to say, you know what, I have to make a higher priority for my well being, my work life balance, let's say, right? So I think that's probably a good approach. If you leverage your calendar to create a routine, do some ad hoc stuff, that's important. Remember, we're really in a physical distance thing, not a social. So even though we're isolated from other people because of things, we should increase our socialistic activity. We should be more social. Reach out, phone calls, video conferences, talk to neighbors with a social distancing thing, go for walks and have conversations, keeping that physical barrier. Let's see. Grocery stores are starting to do a better job of helping to reduce the chance of virus. They're limiting how many people are going into the stores now. That's trending, which is a good thing. Which gives them time to disinfect more things as well. So I think better protection for the people who work there as well as for people going in. So that's a good thing. And of course, if you are a religious person, I'm a Christian, I like to get in God's word. I like to pray and talk to Him throughout the day and that sort of thing. So there's that. Um, and so those are the encouraging tips I'd like to share. Let's go ahead and look at some numbers that may not have been reported to you in the news and other articles. For example, in our local newspaper, I have seen some adjectives about grim. Things are grim. Things have gone up. The rate has increased. But let's look at some of the numbers to help to put this in a better perspective from a factual basis, and then hopefully it's also encouraging. So, for example, I've been compiling some stuff from the local newspaper. On 316, the number of Florida cases was 328. Then it went up on about a week later, and a week later. Today's the April 6th. This line I decided to add today because I read something yesterday. Um, there was some analysis done in Iceland, a cruise ship, and a city or small town in northern Italy. They had some extra test kits apparently, and they tested healthy population with no symptoms. They found about 50% of the so called healthy without any symptoms actually had the COVID 19 when they were tested. So that's actually, you could say that's good and bad, right? The bad is, oh no, there's actually more cases than actually being reported. Well, of course, because if you're not testing it to confirm, you should have more. But 50% is pretty high. So I think these prediction um, things that we hear from the government, these algorithms that are used, uh, are built always on assumptions of things. And so I don't think they're assuming that 50% of the population have been affected without being tested. And that's actually good news because that means we can get to the apex or the peak much quicker. And that means if we get there quicker, then things will start declining sooner. So that's actually good news. So the percent change here in the state of Florida has actually gone down from last week by 40, close to 50%, or is it actually over 50%? So that's great. The rate of new cases have dropped dramatically. I didn't see that anywhere in the newspapers. I don't know why. I don't know why. Here's another thing, a healthy percentage. If we go on this extra 50% from the actual, which is more of a worst case, did you know out of the 22 million people who live in Florida, that 99.9 whatever percent of Floridians do not have COVID-19? Let that sink in a little bit. That's some pretty good news. What really matters, though, isn't the numbers of positive cases. It's really the problem of trying to avoid deaths and overwhelming the hospitals, which, if you don't have enough capacity, could increase the deaths even more. That is where our focus should be, not on number of cases, but the hospitalization data, the information we get from that. And that's not actually being done. So typical estimate is around 18%, but we did get some actual numbers. Apparently, there's 1,555 hospitalized in Florida. I would say there are probably some huge hospitals that have 1,555 beds. So it's almost like all Floridians who have this could go into one hospital or close to it. In Lakeland, there's 840 beds. So you would need two Lakeland hospitals to accommodate all COVID-19 patients who have this. So the point is, if we look at it from the total beds, which I got from this website here, there's 67,000 supposedly beds. Now, some of those beds may be allocated for ICU and other things, but the point is they have beds they can move around. So the COVID-19 is only using up 2.32% of the beds in Florida. No problem. But we need to think a little bit more on this. Of course, beds are occupied even before this pandemic. What is the average occupancy? So things to consider seasonally in Florida, we have snowbirds that come from the north. So it increases the chance of occupancy in hospitals. So that's bad. But good is the elective surgeries have been postponed, which lowers the occupancy. So anything that, to fix something that can wait so that you don't use up those beds, that's great. So that really should offset number one and then some. And then another thing to consider is the flu. That season is ending, thankfully. So we should still say that probably still increases the occupancy. So based on that, I just picked the number and said 50% of the hospital's beds are occupied before COVID-19. So now that means if we can take this 50%, add this to it, we can get an idea of the percentage of beds available. So that's not too bad. So I would say right now, Florida does not have a problem. There's no problem today with COVID-19. There is no problem, no problem, no problem. However, just like with Y2K, where the world freaked out in 1999 that planes were going to fall out of the sky, the electric grid was going to go down, we want to be careful with this hospitalization of resources. We don't want more people to die because of lack of resources. So it's very important to look at it that way. But right now we're okay, and so we need to get data of what's trending. Is it going up at an alarming rate or not? But right now we're good. Deaths, one death is too many, but society has accepted people do die from various things. For example, here in March 28th, the flu, 34 million people in the United States have been affected. 350 have been hospitalized back on March 28th, at least. And over 20,000 people have died from the flu this year. That's a lot. But the rate is only 0.06. So this is bad with COVID-19. It's huge compared to that. Yes, it's just over 1%. You say, oh, that's not too bad, but it's a lot of deaths. In this case, just in the state of Florida, you have 221. I've got some stats at the county level where data is available in Lakeland. But let's wrap this up with some other points of view. With the economic hardship, so in other words, there's an economic hardship because we shut down everything to protect a certain population. So I'm going to pose an argument. The people we want to protect are who are the most vulnerable from, like the flu, or in this case, COVID-19. That is people with compromised immune systems, pre-existing underlying conditions, diabetes and kidney functions and lung and heart stuff. Plus, as we get older, our immune system gets weaker. So there's a certain age. Most people are saying 65 and above, generally speaking. But also, they're very young. If you're a newborn, or if there's a newborn, it takes time to build up a healthy immune system. So that is the population that we want to protect and should be quarantined. So the argument is, should all Floridians or America, world, be isolated? Because they're not going to die from it. For example, I sent an email to a local reporter here at our newspaper, and I shared with him that the only thing I could find on this is something from like 3 or 4 weeks ago from Italy, that out of the number of deaths that they had at that time, if you had no underlying condition, so let's say you're healthy and you get COVID-19, they said less than 1% died from it. So that means if you are a healthy person with no underlying condition, that you have 99.2% chances of survival. So as a society, you have to ask a question, is that acceptable to go back to work with that? So going back to work, I'm not talking about those who are high risk. They don't go back to work. They don't visit you. They're quarantined. But the rest of the population, which is the majority, should they go back to work? That's the argument. So when we look at these things, we need stats, right? We need to know from a Florida perspective, where we don't have income tax, but we have sales tax. How has the revenue been affected? What's the unemployment claims, which draws more from what's needed from Florida? Mental health. We need pollings for stress, anxiety, police reports, number of suicides, domestic related police calls. How many are adult related? Children, uh, pets abuse, drug cases. Has that gone up? Marriage conflicts, which kind of feeds from some of this above. Are marriages being affected? Let's see, late payments. Are mortgage companies, car loans, and utilities, are they suffering cash flow problems? Personally, does that mean there's bankruptcies being filed? Is the average credit report going lower? Are home values going down? Because this economic thing can have a domino effect to other industries like home markets. Home equity, is that shrinking, which means less ways of converting asset to cash? Our savings dollars up and down. So there's a whole bunch of other things that we don't have data for. And so we really need data for this to help with the argument, should people go back to work and when, right? And then we have to ask that very tough, morbid question, how many deaths are acceptable? If we keep isolating those who are most vulnerable until the pandemic is over with, but allow everyone else to go back to work. Thank you.